How good it is to be together again. I hope everything is fine with you. I want to invite you to an exciting adventure. Ready? Imagine that you are alone in a field with your daughter and decides to take the time to take some photos. When you go to check the images, you notice something very strange in one of them. Behind your daughter, there is a figure of a strange being, similar to an astronaut, and that you did not see at the time of the photo. This is the mystery of the man in the space of Solway, a case that we will investigate and finally reveal completely. A very clear summer of 1964, a British city firefighter from Carlisle took photos of his daughter. It was bad for him that this simple fact would occupy manchettes around the world. Until today, 60 years later, there are people who get impressed by the fact. However, in this video we will discover what really happened. The photographer was Jim Templeton, who was with his daughter Elizabeth in a field. Jim sat down with her daughter in a chosen place and decided to take some photos of little Elizabeth. Since she wore a new dress, he had no idea what was going to happen. The fact ended up attracting the attention of the media and provoked decades of debate. All this because of a strange figure that appears in the photo behind the little Liz. For the ufologists, no doubt about what that was. The figure had a white suit, a helmet, and a dark visor. Jim Templeton soon thought he had photographed an astronaut. He could be a man of space, even an alien in space. What he knew was that he photographed something that shouldn't be there. This was very strange, because Mr. Templeton said that the other day, he only saw his wife and other two elderly people sitting in a car next to him. At no point did the visitor see his wife. His camera, however, captured his presence. Jim had no one else seen that day in Bergmarsh, with a view to the incest of Solway Firth in Cumbria, a British condom that faces the front with the Scotch. The man of space was only seen after the revelation of the photos, which at the time needed to be passed through a chemical process to be seen. The fact that the visitor had not been seen at the time of the photo was fascinating. In addition to the use of the apparently spatial suit, what would you do at that time? Something so intriguing. Templeton took the image to the police. The authorities, however, understood that the issue was not investigated. For them, there was nothing so extraordinary in the photo, even though it was strange. The Kodak company that had manufactured the camera said that the photo was completely normal. In addition, offered a reward for someone who proved that the image had been altered in some way. Even so, the issue quickly flooded the media. The local newspaper, Cumberland News, came to mind. From then on, Curio e Corio was released by Daily Mail and Express, says Dr. David Clark, an author who writes about young people. From then on, Templeton began receiving several letters from all over the world. Some people claimed that they were spirits. Others believed that Jim and his daughter had psychic powers that did not have the knowledge of this Clark. Therefore, theories emerged to the mountains. You should imagine. The man in the space was sometimes treated as a supernatural being or a spirit. Others thought he was an alien, an astronaut, or an invisible man. Each story, the mystery behind the photograph made it even worse. Later, two black men visited Jim Templeton, always black men. The secret officers referred to each other as number 9 and number 11, and asked for the man to take them to the place where the photo had been taken. There were even rumors of a possible involvement with a launch planned by a ballistic missile. Blue Strike in Woomera, Australia. Days after Jim photographed Elizabeth, the missile test on the other side of the world was canceled by some technicians, who said they saw two men at the fire. The technicians later saw a man from the space in the Solway in a newspaper and got scared, since the figure was identical to the men who were near the missile, and did a test to be canceled. It increased intrigue. The connections became even more convincing after the revelation that the same Blue Strike missile had been built at the Spade Atom Station of the British Air Force in Cumbria. The place was only a few kilometers away from where Templeton photographed the daughter. Rumors that a young man would have appeared in Woomera in Australia also emerged. Could all these incidents be linked to the man in the Solway space? Well, according to David Clark, no. The author investigated the test footage of missile Blue Strike. I found all the paper in the Ministry of Defence's files for about 5 years. It turns out that the film was in the Imperial Museum of War in London. He said, It looked like a triangle of light. It was clearly a reflex of a lens. Therefore, what made Missil's shot be canceled were not two men, but only what the photographers call lens flare. Lens flare is an optical aberration caused by the dispersion of light that enters the lens through its extremities. This defect causes certain light flashes in circular or hexagonal shapes. This causes a decrease in contrast to the final image. And generally, the shot object is in the shade, which makes the focus difficult. Despite the techniques mentioned by men who appeared near Missil's range, this forced the cancellation, not at all similar to the footage of the day. Everything did not go wrong, caused by the flashlights. Well, still, the image of the astronaut in the Solway gained great public interest by being in the context of the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. There was a whole series of photos, usually taken with cameras, box brownie, showing players' records as you would see in Doctor Who, World War II, and low-level films, the movie Clark. Some of them were very amateur and silly, if you look at them today, but at the time, they attracted attention. Even among all of these, the Jim Templetown stood out a lot. It seemed undeniable, the presence of a man from space there. Serge Pellman, executive of the Association for Scientific Studies of Anomalous Phenomenos, agrees that photography is a product of its time. It is an interesting curiosity. After seeing and connecting with an astronaut, photography is quite impressive. If she, as at the time, the space race was in vogue and several other reports of flying objects were not identified, people quickly related to photography to an astronaut. For Clark, who is a doctor in folklore and stories like this follow a tradition already quite old. The tradition involves our minds in bending our parts, identifying in photos things that are in our imagination. Since the invention of photography, there has been an image of angels, fads, and spirits. It was said that several of these photos have already been explained as being just a result of lens flare or a result of adultery. Even so, in the 19th century, these images became large sources of spiritualism. Therefore, Clark means that people at the time were conditioned to see angels in photos, as well as at the time of the photo of Jim, were conditioned to see an astronaut. If Jim had taken his photo in 1864 instead of 1960, he would have raised the church, and they would have said that she was showing a ghost. The Association for Scientific Studies of Anomalous Phenomenos, which investigates paranormal cases for more than 40 years, still receives a constant flow of new cases annually. However, in recent years, the most frequent cases are of ghost appearances in the place of young people. Even though the technology of analysis has increased, the defraud technology has also followed this advance. People today have access to Photoshop and graphic computing and now artificial intelligence, which are excellent tools for changing images. Could this explain the astronaut of Solway? Dr. Clark, who found Jim Temple in 2002, believes that the story of Jim was quite true. His words were sincere when he said he didn't know how the astronaut appeared in his camera. However, the story of the black men seemed more dubious. Clark doesn't believe that whoever Jim visited was from the government. If it's not a fraud and the Missil blue streak has no connection, how do we explain the astronaut? Well, for Clark, the strange photo doesn't go beyond an absurd coincidence. The great explanation is in a character that little remembers being present. Annie, Jim's wife. Another photo of the day, Elizabeth, Jim's daughter, and Annie herself showed. Jim said that his wife was behind him at the time of the photo in The Man of Space. Well, that's what man imagines, but it's not what a specialist believes. I think for some reason his wife took the photo and he didn't see it, because with that specific camera brand, you could only see 70% of what was in the photo through the viewer. So, let's go to the path of the great solution of the mystery. Annie walked forward and appeared at the camera's range, but remained in an area that Jim couldn't see. She would then be what everyone was interpreting as a man of space. Annie would be with her back turned to the camera, since she came walking where Jim was. That would explain why the astronaut seems to have an elbow forward. Well, but still, remains a mystery. The astronaut had a white suit, while Annie was dressed in blue that day. This factor, however, is easily explained. When the camera is very exposed to light, it tends to turn different colors into white. It's called superexposure. When we say that such a photo was stolen, It's because the light was so strong.